All right, yogis, welcome to our next lecture in our series. So today technically marks the first of your lectures going forward for Module 1. And I've titled it Module 1, Week 1, Video 2, because the first video was our housekeeping and a little bit of admin as well. Before we begin with today and a little overview of what we're going to be discussing for our class for today, let's just bring ourselves into a space of awareness by closing our eyes and rubbing our palms together, just to bring the awareness to the present. When our palms touch, we become aware of the present moment. The hemispheres of our brain have a nice little conversation and we're present and our attention is here. Okay, and then bringing the thumbs into the heart space, knocking on the door of the heart. The heart is that bridge, the link between the body and mind connection. And just take a deep breath in and hold it for a moment, and then let the air come out naturally. And one more time. And just repeat 1 or 2 rounds. And then we will begin with 3 recitations of Om, followed by the chanting of our opening invocation, Om Namah Shivaya Gurave. And when you're ready, deep breath in. Om. 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 Om Namah Shivaya Gurave Satchitananda Murtaye Nishprapanchaya Shantaya Niralambaya Tejase. Om. Take a deep breath in. Gently draw the muscles of your root lock, bands. Those are the muscles of the pelvic floor and the navel. Take another sip of air in, lift the tongue and press it up to the roof of the mouth, with your eyes focused between the eyebrows at the third eye point. All these little flags and signs to lift the energy upward. And breathing out, and slowly blinking the eyes open when you're ready. Good, lovely. So you can always begin a class with the opening invocation, or of course you can do your Om or your 3 Oms, and we'll learn other ways that you can open a class at the beginning. But for the purposes of our lectures, we will use that opening invocation to really tune into the wisdom of the yoga. So we are technically in our, what I call week 1, because that was how the course was designed originally. It was designed in weeks, and each week had different days, and each day had different themes. So I still stick with that original way of wording it. So we're in week 1 of the Ishta Yoga TTC course. And you can now, with this course, do modules 1 and 2 online. Currently, at the time of this recording, module 3 is still done on a 1-week away retreat, as this is where all the physical and hands-on teaching and learning is experienced directly. And there really is no substitute for this real-life experience and exchange. Please ensure that by now you've emailed me your course disclaimer, your about me, and you've printed out your relevant course notes. In the lectures for this week, we are going to be covering what is yoga, what is Hatha Yoga, the origins, history, and development of yoga from the Samkhya or Sankhya philosophy, and looking at the sacred texts that we call the Vedanta, We're also going to be looking at the Indus Valley and the origins of global religion, nature, and divinity. And we'll be examining a little bit more about what the Vedic literature is and how that compares to where we are in the yoga. So first things first, you'll sometimes hear me clicking and moving things around because I'm going to be pulling up images for you and whiteboards, and that ensures that you can get the most out of this visual experience. I am not a computer techie. I am not an IT genius. I know very, very basic entry-level work with regards to video editing and recording. And so I do ask, please, for your indulgence when I am working on recording these lectures for you. The lectures were originally done in a classroom setting, of course, and still that's a wonderful way to do this work. Then later on, I recorded the entire module 1 and 2 lectures using the live interactions of myself and the students of that particular year. However, for concise bringing together of the information to update the teacher training and to make it much more relevant to where we are now in our global situation, I am re-recording these lectures and I'm speaking directly to you as if you were sitting in front of me. As we go through the lectures, I ask please that you take down questions and you take down notes for further research. And please send me your questions so that I can answer them as best as I can. All right, so we're going to get right into it and begin with our Module 1, Week 1 Video 2 lecture. Let's go. First thing that I want us to have a look at is your manual. So I'm going to pull up the manual over here, and we're going to have a little look at, we're just going to kind of go through it together and then have a look at how I've laid it out for you in a way that maybe is really, really, I feel, quite user-friendly. And of course, as I say, any questions, go for it, let me know. So we have the recording here in front of us, the projection on our screen. And I'm just going to make sure that that is, yes. Okay, so please open up your manual over here, right to the first page. I suggest having this ring bound so that it is nice and easy to use. And then in module 2, you'll get your follow-up manual as well. So this is your front page of your manual. You'll see at the top are the logos of the organizations and the institutions through which you are accredited to study. The Ishta Yoga School is registered for the 200, 300-hour and 500-hour level. And I am the principal of the Ishta Yoga School, so, and as well as your lead trainer as well. You currently doing this course are on your 200-hour teacher training. And then when you have finished this course, you can do your advanced teacher training, which is an additional 300 hours. But please, there's no rush to do that, okay? What I recommend is you do your 200-hour training, and then you teach for a year or two, and then you go back and you jump into the 300-hour training, and you can really, really advance your skills going forward. It's entirely up to you. The course that you will be certified through is through the Yoga Teacher Fellowship of South Africa, the YTF, and also the IYF, which is the International Yoga Fellowship. Our school was never Yoga Alliance certified, and up until the time of this recording, it is not Yoga Alliance certified, simply because the registering bodies that we are registered through came around a lot longer before Yoga Alliance was born as an entity. Our school is very, very old, and we have already got our international accreditation and affiliation. So we didn't really feel like we needed any further than that. All right, you can also see here that we've got the website for the Ishta Yoga School, which I record a lot of events up. I put a lot of events up there, and I'm also busy working on an alumni page for you all going forward once you've qualified. This is in lineage of Marina Kantarde, which is my teacher, who is my teacher. Her spiritual name, Acharya Sannyasi Pembindu Mahadeva Mahasaya. And also in the lineage of Durgana Magda Inglethorpe, with obeisance to our great teacher, Kavi Yogi Raj Manifinger. And then you can see here that I've got all of the original accreditations of the manual Durgana 2004, Marina 2007, and myself 2020, having updated the course manual at that time. By the time you are finished with this course, you will be internationally accredited and certified to teach anywhere in the world. Then we have a welcome note by myself here, and I do recommend that you please read that in your own time, a little bit about my journey and how I got here. Then there is the about me, which gives all of my accreditation and what brought me to this point of being able to teach you. Next, we have the welcome note by Marina herself, and at the time of this recording, she is the chair lady of the Yoga Teachers Fellowship of South Africa. She's also my teacher and the one who accredits our course through the Ishta Yoga School and represents us internationally as well. All right, you'll see that I often have some images in this course manual, such as this image over here. And then underneath it, I've put what that image might be. So I also want you to learn a little bit more about the symbols that you'll gain throughout your yogic journey in this life, and also cross-cultural symbols that you'll explore. This over here is a Tibetan Buddhist symbol, the Om Mani Padme Hum. And the one a little bit higher up, that's a symbol of Shakti, the great goddess, or the power, the energy that flows through this universe, and the symbol Om over there. So it's really good for you to learn and to study and to get a deeper understanding of symbolism as well while you're exploring your teacher training. Okie dokes. You'll see some Sanskrit here that I kept as a part of Marina's original teaching. Shanti means peace. Om Tat Sat, I am that. Tat Tvam Asi, I am that supreme. I am that eternal. I am that I am. And Om Mani Padme Hum, I bow to the supreme jeweled lotus. On page number 7, you've got your table of contents. Each week with each of our lectures and our modules, we're going to have recommended readings and videos for you to watch. And then I'm going to say, okay, from this week, I want you to please do lessons 1, 2, and 3. And then you can even put there in the margin if it's been completed, just so you've got your own little way of following that index. On page 8, we have our Ishta lineage. Here's a nice picture of Lord Ganesha, the remover of obstacles, and specifically an understanding of what Ishta is. Ishta is an acronym for integrated science of Hatha, Tantra, and Ayurveda, or the integrated science or the integrated school of Hatha Yoga, Tantra, and Ayurveda. And so I want you to just have a little bit of a read through this section as well here, because we want to understand through our Ishta course, specifically these 3 key sciences of yoga, which will help and assist us in sculpting the best yogic practice for us. Hatha yoga itself relates to the physical body. In practicing a sequence of asanas, that's your yoga postures, and pranayama, which is your controlled breathing techniques, we start to open the body's energy channels so that the energy can flow freely and we can begin to enjoy the feeling of bringing our body back into balance. Many people want to know what Tantra is when they do this course. Tantra comes from the root tanoti, which means expansion, and trayati, which is liberation. In Ishta Yoga, Tantra refers to the oneness between the individual and the universe. It's the supreme connection, the supreme realization of the understanding of our oneness, like the drop of water in the ocean, which you'll hear me regularly using as a metaphor for the yogic journey and the ultimate goal of remembering, of self-realization. So we practice Tantra by using breath and meditation techniques, and later on, some people even go into elaborate ritual processes, which are very, very ancient part of the journey of the Tantrika, the practitioner of Tantric. Finally, Ayurveda is of great interest to us, especially those of you interested in nutrition and yogic lifestyle. Ayurveda is the science of life, specifically that which keeps us alive. And we will, in this course, we'll understand prana and the elements and how those all work together in the universe. Then we'll go through the background of where this school, the system of yoga originated. Please, this is something you must learn, memorize, because you want to understand the lineage of our school of yoga and the story of Mani, because he's the father of our school of yoga. He was a South African, which is very interesting because Ishta Yoga is the first and really proudly South African school of yoga that was formed in the late 1960s. You can see in your manual that Mani was initiated into Kriya Yoga by Paramahansa Yogananda in Los Angeles, and later as a Kavi Yogi by Shivananda in India. I've actually got one of Swami Shivananda's books sitting here in front of me as well. And if ever you can get your hands on material by Swami Shivananda, please do, because his school of yoga is very prolific still to this day. So read through this understanding of the origins of yoga, of Ishta Yoga, should I say, because after Mani's training overseas, he came back to South Africa and he transformed his home into an ashram. And then over many years, Mani and his son, Alan, hosted many gurus at their house, including Swami Venkatesananda, who was a friend of T. Krishnamacharya, and who was also Shivananda's jewel student, the Ramakrishna Mission, Iyengar Swamis from all over the world. And you can read this in your manual and learn a little bit about those wonderful people who've contributed to our lineage. I've actually found some images of these different great teachers, and I've put a little bit here about them, which was an addition to the manual that I put, because sometimes it's really lovely to actually put faces to these names. And don't worry if at the beginning the Sanskrit seems a little bit intimidating, because you will, it's like learning a whole new language. It is learning a whole new language, and you will wrap your tongue around it eventually. And once you do, you've got this grasp of the Sanskrit. It's just such a beautiful experience to spend the rest of your life kind of unveiling the gems, jewels, and rubies of this ancient language. So please spend some time studying this, reading through it. And then here is your direct Ishta lineage. So we've got the lineage coming from all of Mani's teachers, and Mani's full spiritual name is Kavi Yogiraj, which are titles. Swarananda, Mani, Finger. Finger because he was a teacher, he was pointing people in a direction. Who trained Marina, who trained myself, who is now training you. All right, so please spend some time reading this. And if you've got any questions, I'm always here if you want. I've also given a little bit of external resources for those of you who, like myself, are history buffs and who like to go a little deeper into the history of these things. One of the beautiful things about the Ishta school of yoga is its authenticity and its link through these great teachers right back, they say, to the time of Lord Krishna himself. So we have an unbroken lineage of great wisdom according to our spiritual teachings, which goes very, very far back and which we can be proud of and honored to carry this lamp into the modern world, this new age of the Aquarian enlightenment. More on that in future discussions. On page 12, you can have the opening invocation. And if you actually click on the digital format, obviously not on the printed book, but here, it will take you to a link where the opening invocation is being sung, and you can hear it and go through it. We have discussed this already in a previous video, but I love this translation here in the manual. Om Namah Shivaya Gurave. I bow to the Guru, the self of all. And notice it's self with a capital S, so the essence of all. So who is this Guru that we're bowing to? It is the self of all, the supreme soul. It's not a person sitting on a chair. It's not a man in an orange robe. The Guru, capital G, that we bow to is the supreme self, the soul of the universe, the ultimate understanding of God in its greatest form. Sat Chit Ananda Murtaye, the embodiment of truth, awareness, and bliss. So I bow to this Guru, the self of all, who is the embodiment of truth, awareness, or consciousness, is another translation of that, and bliss. Nishprapanchaya Shantaya. Listen, Nishprapanchaya Shantaya. This self of all, this supreme Guru, this great wisdom, embodying soul of the universe, is living within everything and is the true nature of everything. That is what it is. This Guru is the true nature of all. Supreme peace, Shantaya, supremely peaceful, and needs no support. All right, this force, this supreme soul of the universe, will exist even if we don't exist. But it sustains and supports all life. Niralambaya Tejasi. This force illuminates the entire universe with the light of consciousness. So when we chant this mantra, we are aligning ourselves to that force of the universe, which is supreme, the great light, the great peace, the great truth, the great consciousness, the great bliss. And we're reminding ourselves that it doesn't exist outside of ourselves, it exists right within us. Okay, very, very beautiful. And under this, I've put an image of Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva, the Adi Yogi. Adi, the word Adi, means the first, the original, or the primal. The first yogi, the original yogi, the primal yogi. Lord Shiva, we'll understand later. You do not have to be a Hindu to study yoga, to practice yoga, to be a yoga teacher. In Hinduism, Lord Shiva is the supreme God force, the supreme deity of the universe, an image of God transformed, in that aspect of God specifically, which destroys illusion and disillusionment, which destroys darkness and fear, and who then through that process leads us to a state of enlightenment and awakening. But in the yogic philosophy, Lord Shiva is seen as a physical representation of the perfect yogi, of the ultimate practitioner of yoga. Shiva represents our consciousness. Shiva represents the soul self. His counterpart, his partner, his consort, Shakti, represents the physical part of ourself. And he represents the essence of who we are, the consciousness, the soul. And so if we look at him, and there are beautiful images of him all over on the internet, Let's see if we can pull up a few beautiful ones here for you. You'll see that he always has this kind of nature where he is always contemplating. He's in a state of meditation and rest. He is in a space of enlightenment. Here's a really big statue of him. You can actually see the little temple under there. So Lord Shiva is seen in this beautiful Padmasana, this lotus posture, and he's seen as holding different gestures, different mudras of self-knowledge. He's holding the trident, which represents the three gunas, the three forces of the universe. He's got the snake around his neck, which is symbolic of the life force energy that moves through us. He's got the crescent moon, his hair through which the Ganga, the Ganges, actually pours out of into the world. And we can see images of him with his divine family. This is Parvati, the goddess who symbolizes nature. Lord Ganesha, the remover of obstacles. So you can study as deep as you want into the philosophy of the deities. But to be a yogi, you don't ever have to change your religion. You don't have to worship any deities. But we do want to study the myths. We want to study the stories, because the philosophies of the universe were woven into the sacred images of these deities. So when Lord Shiva sits over here, it's a reminder to the yogi, regardless of their religion, that we're striving for a state of poise, that we're striving for a state of balance, of introspection, of meditation, of enlightenment. We can see the light emanating from his head here. The tiger skin representing mastery over the primal or the animal nature of ourself. His beautiful physique representing the perfect physical form that we strive to. So Shiva is seen as a symbol, as an embodiment of the highest aspects that a yogi can achieve and attain in this life. All right. So before we continue with our lectures, we want to have a look today at, right at the beginning, the definitions of yoga and also what is Hatha Yoga and why we are studying this specific tradition of the yogic philosophy. So I want you should have your manual by now. You should have some kind of a manual, a notebook. Sorry, where am I going with this? You should have a notebook and something to write with. And your notebook should be dedicated completely to this course. So please press pause now, get your notebook out, and I want you to make some notes right now before we even dive into things. Once you've got your notebook, I want you to define two things for me. And even if you don't have an explanation, even if you don't have a definition, it's not a problem, because later we can come back and actually look at that and say, all right, has my understanding of yoga changed and evolved through this course? Hopefully so. And then one day, 5, 10 years from now, you come back and you go, oh my word, it's changed and evolved even more. And my personal understanding of yoga and of Hatha Yoga, it's always changing and evolving. And that's a good thing. It means that we're growing. So the first question that I want you to write down is, what is yoga? Question number 1, what is yoga? This is your definition. What is yoga to you who's watching this right now? The answers could be many things. I'm not, some people might say it's a form of stretching. Some people might say it's a philosophy. Some people might say it's a path. Some people might say, I'm not too sure actually. Okay, if you can hear those noises, by the way, outside, those are guinea fowls that play in my garden in the afternoons. And I think it's because my neighbor likes to throw bread into the garden and bring the guinea fowls in. So if you hear them, I'm sorry, but they are beautiful and they're part of my garden. So pause the video now and write down your definition of yoga. Go ahead. Just keywords, sentences, whatever comes up to you. Go and do that now for me, please. Next question, question number 2. What is Hatha Yoga? Notice how I'm pronouncing it. It's not Hatha, although it's spelled H-A-T-H-A. It's not Hatha, it's not Hatha, it's Hatha. The TH pronounces an emphatic ta, ta, all right? Hatha, not Hatta, Hatha, Hatha, all right? So the ta, the TH is a little bit exasperated. So then next question that I want you to write down right now, don't go further without writing this down. What is Hatha Yoga? What is it to you? How do you define it? Is there a difference? What is the difference? And don't worry if you don't have any answers just yet. Pause and let's continue from there. Okay, so now you should have your 2 definitions journals down, and we're going to discuss them a little bit later, but for now, just keep them there. And as you are studying your manual and you're studying different texts and you're learning and progressing, keep coming back and visiting these definitions, and you can update them as you go. But right now, we're going to travel a little bit back in time, and we're going to explore the origins and the progressions of yoga and how it came to be where it is now to this day. So people like to think that civilization began with the Egyptians and the Sumerians and the Babylonians, but there really is modern evidence to show that now civilization began in India about 30,000 years ago in an area called the Indus Valley. And it's only now recently where scientists and academics are now going, 25,000 years before the Egyptians put hieroglyphics into the pyramids, the yogis already had a full system of philosophy, science, surgery, medicine, language, anatomy, botany, astronomy, astrology, all of it. And we now have all the evidence and proof that we need of that. The people of India and the Indus Valley in particular had running water and plumbing before the Roman Empire was even formed. So it's a really, really ancient culture and civilization. And the first and original image of a yogi sitting in a yoga pose is from the Harappa civilization. And there's a 30,000-year-old image of a yogi sitting in Padmasana. I'm going to show you here an image of a yogi that's 2,600 years old. Let me pull it up onto the screen here. Here we go. Sorry, this one over here on the right, this Indus Valley seal, is 9,000 BC over here. So we have one that we know is 30,000 years old. This one over here is really ancient. It's a 9,000-year-old image. There's one here that is 2006 to 2,900 years old. We can see this image, a little bit of a progression from the first image over there, which you can see is a lot more simplistic, but you can still see the image sitting in the Padmasana, in the lotus form, on what looks like maybe as a tree trunk or some kind of elevated platform. There's images there of fish, of water, or snake imagery. There looks like what is phallic imagery over there. And because of the horns or the crescent moon shape, this could very well be an image of the Adi Yogi, Lord Shiva. In this image over here, we see the Adi Yogi, Lord Shiva, as the master of animals and the master of nature, and the god of nature, of humans and of animals, the original horned god of that represented both the hunt and primal nature within people. You must understand these horned images of ancient gods, pre-Christian deities. The horns on their head represent power, it represents animal nature, and it represents royalty and also assertiveness and the power that these had as divine beings. Over here, we've got a 2,700-year-old yogi sitting in the state of samadhi found in the Indus Valley civilization. And this is how the yogi was buried, sitting in Gyan Mudra, and you can see the index finger touching the thumb in a Padmasana, in a lotus posture, which we're still using to this day. I highly, highly encourage you all to go and do more research on the history and the origins of yoga after this lecture, because it's absolutely fascinating. So this means that we know that between 5, 6, 9, and even 30,000 years ago, that there was a formalized system of yogic practice. We don't really know what it might have been called at that time, but we know that people were already doing yoga postures, which is actually mind-blowing if you really think about it, because 25,000 years before the Roman Empire came into existence, if we just think about the time that has elapsed since the beginning of Christ, which is only 2,000 years, how much has happened during that time in 2,000 years? It's difficult for us almost to perceive these kind of time frames, because 2,000 years versus 5 plus 30,000 years odd is really difficult for our modern human minds to conceptualize. But I just want you to think back on that and kind of the vastness of the time that has elapsed over the ongoing nature of these ancient practices. The first time the word yoga, we see the word yoga coming up, was in the Rig Veda. The Rig Veda is a 5,000-year-old text. 3000 BC is when the Rig Veda was put down to paper. The Vedas, which we'll still look at today and explore further, there are 4 Vedas. The word Veda means a science, all right? And there were 4 ancient primary Vedas, 4 writings on sciences. And the word Veda, like the word Ayurveda, the science of life, the word Veda means science. So write that down, because that's something that you're going to want to know over the course of your yogic journey. Veda means science. Ayurveda is a subsidiary of that. It's the science of life, but there were other kinds of Vedic knowledges, the science of ritual, the science of religion, the science of language, of architecture, etc. So I have here, this was from when I traveled to India in 2020. I found this beautiful copy of the Vedas in a concise format over here. This is only the English. It's not the Sanskrit or the Sanskrit transliterations. It's the translation in English. And you can see that this beautiful, and it's a lovely little satin cover with gold embossing. It has got now I don't know if this is going to come across okay on the video, if it's going to come back with, but it's got the Rig Veda, the Yajur Veda, the Sama Veda, and the Atharva Veda. So this has all 4 Vedas concisely put down inside here. Now these Vedas, these sciences, would have, up until the point where they were committed to writing, been handed down orally for thousands of years, passed down, where monks and priests would verbatim have to learn every single Sanskrit sound, similar to what the Hebrews did with the Old Testament, the Torah, and the other sacred scriptures of Hebrew. And they would have to know every single word in the meter, in the rhyme, in the rhythm, as it was handed down to them, so that there could be no corruption of the knowledge, no corruption of the texts. And we don't really know how long these Vedic oral literatures were passed down before they were committed to scriptural writing 5,000 years ago. But when they were committed 5,000 years ago down to writing, it is said that they were already ancient, the origin of which was not known. So we do believe that these ancient sciences of The study of nature and life and the soul and the universe are the original understandings of these things, divinely inspired and received through revelation to the rishis. The word rishi is a seer, someone who has a direct experience, a direct revelation of the sciences and the mystical understandings of the intricate internal workings of this universe. So I just want to summarize that for you over there. So when we say that the first time we hear of the word yoga, the word yog, J-O-G, yog, in any kind of literature, was the literature of the first of the 4 texts known as the Vedas. And the first of these texts was known as the Rig Veda, the first one over there. You can see on the top of this book, the Rig Veda. And this doesn't mean that this is the beginning of yoga. It means it's the first time the word is put down into writing. We know that it has a much more ancient tradition prior to the time of writing. And the way that this would be done, as I said just now, similar to the Hebrew scribes and many oral traditions in the ancient world, like the Celts and the Druids, was that a master who would know all of the literature, the Sanskrit words verbatim. In other words, he or she could recite that entire scripture by heart perfectly without making any error. Okay, just think about that. It's kind of like being able to commit the entire Bible to memory without looking at it and not getting any mistakes. All right, and there were ways that they could do this through rhyme, through meter, through rhythm, through poetry, to be able to commit these long texts to memory. And a master would commit that their whole life to memory. And then they would take on a student and they would train that student for years and years, decades, to commit it to memory, so that when that master died, the new student would become the master and thus pass on the oral tradition without any changes in the scripture for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So that's the first time the word yoga appears. Yog, to yoke, to unify, to connect, to join, was in that 5,000-year-old text, but definitely much, much older than that. Imagine having to memorize the entire Bible off by heart, word for word, verbatim, without making any errors. So we can have a great appreciation for what our ancient brothers and sisters were doing to commit knowledge to memory so that it was never lost. Now, when I traveled through India, I learned something quite interesting and new that I had never known before. I asked a Swami why it was that the writing was, why at one point was it committed? Why was this oral tradition passed along for generations, hundreds if not thousands of years, perfectly without changing it? Why was it then committed to writing? And let me pull up a little image here for you. I like working with pictures. So I'm just drawing things off of Google for you guys. But this is what this is what a Sanskrit kind of font would look like. Let's see if I can open the tab. Here we go. Sanskrit, you can see written over here. And this is what it would eventually have looked like. This is probably more of a medieval-based text, but originally it was most likely written on leaves, palm leaves, and recorded in that way. But it's a beautiful language, Devanagari, the written language of Sanskrit, and you're still going to learn more about the Sanskrit on your Sanskrit modules coming up. So this is what it would have looked like in those days, something to this extent, but probably on the leaves of a palm tree. And of course, being the nature of not yet having paper or parchment, these leaves would probably not have lasted very long due to humidity and rain. And so we've lost a lot of the originals. But again, just like with all ancient sacred scriptures, and with the oral law, the written law was probably even more strictly maintained, so that a scribe would copy verbatim, letter by letter, the writings over from the previous or the original manuscript to the new one. And just like with the Hebrews copying down their Torah, if a scribe made even one letter error, just one letter error, not even a word, a letter error, that whole page would be burned and destroyed and start over again. So they were very, very strict about keeping knowledge true to its origins without any deviation of any sorts. So when I spoke to the Swami when I was in India and I asked, why was the writing then committed down? You know, why was the knowledge put to writing? The answer was quite amazing for me. He said that there was a prediction that civilization would begin to fall 5,000 years ahead of time into the future. Okay, so you and I are sitting, it's 5,000 years ago or 3,000 BC, and we're having this conversation. We're saying, we've had visions, we've had revelations that 5,000 years from now, okay, go to the 21st century where Ryan is sitting with you, that society would be in its decline, that religion, science, culture would be in its decline. Okay, this is something called the yugas, the four great ages of time and civilization. We might get to that one day in the course. But that humanity would be living in its dark age. Now, for those of us sitting here in the 21st century, we think that we're at the height of civilization. We think we're at the peak of civilization, but not according to our ancient forebears. They believed that we were actually at the point of major degeneration of society. One of the signs of the degeneration of society, the degeneration or the decline of intelligence, was the fact that people would stop using their memory, stop using their mind so much. And so the mental faculty was seen to degenerate or to decline. And that's a sign of the declining of culture. Now, how do we do that? Well, rather than training the mind to memorize scripture, to memorize language, to really use the computer of the mind, what do we do now? We just have everything. I don't have to remember it. It's over there. I can just Google something. I can just go on my phone and recall the telephone number of my granny. Whereas in even 20 years ago, I had to remember her phone number. So the mind is not being used as much. It's not being used nowadays in a focused and condensed way. The human mind is becoming very lazy. And this was a sign of social decline, because the only people who needed to write things down were old people, because the mind might have been getting a little bit soft, the memory a little bit scattered, and so they would have to write things down because their mind wasn't as strong as it used to be. And so he said to me that the prophecy showed that the human brain, the human mind would decline in its potential power. And so we would eventually not have the ability to commit this all to memory. And so it had to be preserved somewhere, and it would have to be preserved in writing so that the future generations wouldn't lose it. A very, very interesting and quite a bizarre thing for some people to wrap their heads around. But if we look at our society, there is, although we like to think we are very civilized, I wonder if that is indeed the case. If we just look at the state of our world and of mental health and of information and truth and non-truth in the world, we might have to be asking ourselves some serious questions. But there are still Brahmin priests in India who have maintained the unbroken lineage of still learning these ancient texts off by heart. They're still there and they're still continuing the tradition of thousands of years, which makes me happy to know. All right, so we have this word yoga, which we now know comes from the Rig Veda. We see its origin there. Rig Veda, and the word is yoga. All right, probably with a longer O. It's not jog, it's yog with a soft y. All right, so this eventually became the word yoga, and it means to yoke. To yoke, what do we mean? To yoke, to connect, to join. All right, to connect, to join, unify, unite. So that is the actual meaning of the word yoga: to unify, to join, to connect. So unify with what, connect with what, join with what? That is the subject of our conversation here today. And also the word yoke appears in the Bible as well. So, you know, there's a scripture, and I'll find it for us just now, where Jesus basically says, you know, to yoke yourself to the Lord, to yoke yourself with him. His message is divine. To connect, to join. And that's exactly what we're doing in yoga. We're connecting the individual self, the personal self, the individual soul, the Jiva Atman, with the supreme soul, the divine self, the Paramatma. And so it's mimicked as well in the teachings of Jesus in the Bible. So people say, okay, well, what are you connecting to? And maybe an aspect of is what some people might say is the connection of the body and the mind, or the body, mind, and soul. Some people will already start going with a definition like that. So we say, what are you connecting? What are you unifying? And they might say, I'm connecting my body, mind, or body, mind, and soul. Or the connection of the mind and the body for the purpose of serving the soul, which was actually the definition of one of our yoga teachers last year, and a really beautiful definition. The union, the connection of body, mind, and heart to the purpose of serving the soul. Quite lovely. So to understand the yoking, or what is being yoked, and what we mean by this, joined or unified or connected, we first need to understand the philosophy that came before yoga. The philosophy that came before yoga was known as Samkhya philosophy, also pronounced Sankhya philosophy. Okay, and Samkhya philosophy, we're just going to dive a little bit into that so that we can have an understanding of it, and then be able to know, okay, yoga took root in Samkhya philosophy and then kind of evolved and grew from there. What could it be? I'm going to pull up the whiteboard here. All right. So Samkhya, or Sankhya, philosophy. All right. And please make notes of this in your journal as we're talking. All right. There we go. Okay. So I'm sure that you can see this nice and clearly. So Samkhya philosophy led to the practice that we now call yoga. So the philosophy led to a practice. Samkhya was the philosophy, yoga was the practice. What does this mean? if you have a philosophy, then you're always going to have that small group of people who want to apply the philosophy, who want to actually test the philosophy out. Does this make any sense? In every religion, you've got those people. We call them the mystics. So with the Christians originally, you had Christian philosophy, and then you had small groups of people who wanted to apply the teachings. We might call them the Christian mystics or the Gnostics, certain monks. They want direct experience of the teachings. They don't just want to say, oh, well, I'm just going to believe what I'm being told. They wanted to experience it directly. The same as with the Jews, Judaism, those who study the Kabbalah, they want a direct experience of the teachings of Judaism. It's a mystical practice. Mysticism means revealed, directly experienced. So yoga was the direct experience, the mystical practice of a philosophy called Samkhya philosophy. This came around long before Hinduism. Hinduism came around much, much later. Before Hinduism came something called Samkhya, a philosophy called Samkhya philosophy. What is this Samkhya? All right. Samkhya is a philosophy of what we call dualism. Now, just write that word down. I'm going to put it down on the side here, dualism. And if you have any idea on what dualism might be, you can make some notes. Okay. All right, so dualism is a philosophy that says that everything in the universe is polar. So dual meaning two. So everything in the universe is dual. There is polarity. If you've got the front of a book, you've got the back of a book. If you've got day, you've got night. If you've got masculine, you've got feminine. If you've got body, you've got, or the material, you've got the spirit. So everything in the universe is dual. Okay, this is the original yin and yang. So Samkhya philosophy says that this universe is dual in nature. But within that dualist nature of the universe, there is always a little bit of the opposite. So if we think of the image of the yin and the yang, let's pull that up, shall we? I'm just going to stop sharing here. If we look at the image of the yin and yang, which is a Chinese or Taoistic symbol, let's use this one. We can see that on the one side, there is not just black, on the other side is not just white. It says that the universe is divided into two polarities, but within each of those polarities, there's a little bit of the other one. Right? So don't worry too much about this at the moment. But in the philosophy of yin and yang, yin representing all things that are nighttime, dark, cold, negative, passive, feminine, solid, and then on the yang side, the day, the light, the warm, the positive, the active, the male, the hollow, all of these things are represented as dualistic nature. The universe has two parts, two sides of the coin, and it can never just be only one. Every single thing is divided into this dual or polar, there's polarity in everything. Okay, so this is what the ancients were studying, trying to learn more about. So let's open up our whiteboard again. All right. So you can use that yin-yang symbol to kind of study what we're talking about, because it shows that the universe is never fully separated. The universe can never be separated. It always has to be a unification of opposites. And so this entire nature of our universe is polar, is dual. And neither is more important than the other. They are equal but opposite. And everything in our nature, in the nature around us, consists of that polarity. So even if we take a magnet, for example, let's pretend this is a magnet. So out of the north pole of the magnet comes the current and flows down around into the south pole of the magnet and continuously moves like that. Our planet is the same. The electromagnetic field of our planet comes out of the north pole and goes back into the south pole and around. So let's pull up a picture of that for you. I love using pictures, as I say, because then we get a nice visual example of what we're talking about. So let's look here. And I want you guys to go and study this magnetic field. Go and look into all of this. So here we go. We've got, here's a nice example. So out of a magnet, out of the northern pole of the magnet, comes the electromagnetic field out. You can see there, it's coming out of the top. And it moves around and it's taken in, it's absorbed by the south pole of the magnet. So the one is the yang force, it exerts energy, it's the masculine, it's the solar force, it exerts energy. And the one is the yin force, the feminine, the receptive energy that pulls in. So there's one part that exerts and there's one part that draws in. And this is how, excuse me, this is what we call electromagnetic force, because the one is electric, the one is magnetic. And this is us, this is our being as well. It's the same with the earth. You can see here, it's the same with our planet. The entire polarity of this planet is working the same as a magnet. The force that comes or exudes out of the North Pole and then goes around and it's absorbed into the South Pole. And you can go and study this yourself and look into this and study the physics of it. But if you look at this picture of the Earth, it's almost like it looks like a living vortex. And this is actually what the chakras look like as well, by the way. They're not two-dimensional discs, they're vortexes like this. Okay, very, very fascinating and intriguing thing for us to study. The science of the study of these forces of the planet is called geomagnetism. And so that's kind of what I wanted to show you, how everything has to be divided into these different polarities. So in Samkhya philosophy, it's said that the universe is divided originally into two primary forces. Okay, let's just see if I can erase. Okay, so the universe is divided into two primary forces. And in using the language of Samkhya, it's divided into what is called Purusha, which we could now call Shiva, and the other one was called Shakti. Okay. Shiva and Shakti are deities. They're embodiments of these forces. Shiva is the god, Shakti is the goddess. You don't have to know this for your exams, but I just want you to really have a good understanding as to how yoga evolved. So Purusha is that aspect of the universe which is consciousness. That's why we say Shiva represents consciousness. Prakriti is that aspect of the universe which is form. So we could say form versus force. Okay. Form versus force. Form, we could also say matter. And I want you to be writing this down. Draw things, use colors. Don't just look at it on the video. Okay, so form and force. We could also say force or consciousness. Okay. So this is how Samkhya philosophy said the universe is divided into these two polarities. Let's just take a moment to consider this. Everything in this universe has form. Okay? It doesn't necessarily have to be physical, because if you think of an apple, now, if you think of an apple, the image still has a form in your mind. There's a mental form. It doesn't have a physical form, but if you can see it in your head, there has a form. But within that, within all of the forms of the universe, there is a force that moves through it, and we call this consciousness. This means that I am not my body. I inhabit my body for a period of time. The two are always working together because energy in this universe cannot be created or destroyed. It can only take on different form. Okay? That's Newton's third law. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transformed in its form. Okay? So you've got energy and form, and it's always transmuting and transforming and translating and transfiguring itself. Right. This is originally what people call God. But God was never seen as a person. God is seen as a force of the universe and a form. And so originally, God was divided into two polarities. The one was called Purusha, which is the mind of God, and the one is called Prakriti, which is the way in which God manifests. The sun, the moon, the stars, planets, nature is what we call Prakriti, the nature of this world. That's quite a different way to seeing it, the way that modern religions would see it. Okay, God is nowadays something that people think of as being outside of his creation. This philosophy says God cannot be separated from the creation because God is the creation. God is both the creation and the force that is moving through the creation. And God is constantly taking on different forms. And the force is directing us, the intelligence, the mind of God. The Purusha was later called Shiva and was made to be seen as a god, a masculine god figure, just so that our human mind could grasp this, because it's very, very difficult to grasp something so big, such a vast concept. So the human mind needs to put pictures to it. That's the only reason why the gods in India look like they do. They are figures that symbolize concepts. And it was the same with Prakriti. She was given the form of the feminine, Shakti. And so the ancients believed that the universe was divided into masculine and feminine, God, goddess, day, night, sun, moon, force and form. Now in yoga, we call this Ha, Ha and ta. I'm just going to write this here. Ha and ta. I'm going to just change the colors a bit. Ha and ta. These are just the names that we give, the sounds of these forces. So Samkhya philosophy says that everything in this universe is one, but that polarity exists, and that one can never be separated. You can never break the polarities apart. So it's two, but it's one. Does that make sense? Just like electricity is two, but it's one. Okay, so electricity has electromagnetic force, just like the atom is two but one. So the atom has electrons, the negative force, and protons, the positive force. In the middle is the neutral, which we'll still get to. If you look at an atom, that proton is the heart, the sun, the masculine force, and electrons, the ta, the moon, the feminine force. And there's a third element that holds it all together, the neutral. Okay, we're still going to learn more about that, but that is the unifying aspect, that force which holds it all together. So this rule, this law, forms the foundation of all matter and all existence, right down to the atom. Just take a moment to contemplate this, because it's actually quite massive, isn't it? We can actually, if I stop the share, because for me, it shakes me to my core, the very thought of all of this. It excites me so much. Let's just have a look. So we remember the symbol of the yin and the yang, and now we take the atom. Some of you will remember this from school, I'm sure. The dance of the atom, what that looks like. So we've got the protons, the electrons, and the neutrons. Three forces. And remember, when we looked at the trident of Lord Shiva, what did we see? I told you about it earlier. We have his pitchfork, his trident, with those 3 points over there. That represents the three forces of the universe, the three gunas, which we will get to still. So we'll come to that, the three gunas, the three doshas. But for now, just know that the atom is kind of identified, the proton by the yang energy, the masculine, the electric, the electron by the yin energy, the magnetic, the passive, the feminine, and the neutron is somewhere here in the middle, the force that holds it all together. So what does this have to do with downward facing dogs, we wonder, yoga poses and all of these things? We'll discover that as we continue our journey. But usually at this point of the course, people are going, oh my goodness, what have I got myself into? I didn't know I was going to be studying physics, history, languages, chemistry, but here we go. So from these Samkhya philosophy came a group of people. And they said, I like the idea of this, it makes complete sense, but now I want to have a direct experience of it. I don't just want to believe it, I don't just want it to be a theory. I want to know it, I want to see it, I want to feel it. And so they developed an entire system of direct experience that we now call yoga. All right. Direct. Okay, that was the point of the practice of yoga, to have a direct experience. Yoga was never supposed to be a belief system. It's never been anything else. It's a science. Saying, okay, we've got the theory, that's Samkhya, but now we need a system of direct revelation to show us that that is in fact true. We want to know for ourselves. The yogis were like the first cosmic astronauts. And thankfully, after many thousands of years of yogis having these direct revelations, we now have all the proof that we need to know that this system works and it is indeed legit. So what is the yoga? What is the union? Okay, I want you to start to test your minds now. What do you think it is? We've got these two aspects. What is the union? What is the yoking? If they can never be separated, that means they were never apart. So what is the joining then? If they were never separated, if they cannot be separated, then what is the joining? What is the union? You tell me. Make some notes. Pause the video. So I'm going to unpack a little bit of that for you now, because a lot of what you are going to be doing over the next few months is finding these answers out for yourself. However, we're just going to get the ball rolling a little bit for you here. So there is within this universe an illusion, and this illusion is called Maya. The illusion of separatedness. That looks funny. I'm looking at my notes next to me. If you look down here, I'm looking at some of my keywords. So Maya is the illusion of separatedness. There is an illusion that says that I am separate from you and you are separate from me. So there is something that happens that says that me and this book are two separate things. Something tells us that we are separate. Something in the mind, in our human condition, tells us that we are separate from one another. And therefore, if this book and I are separate, and the person and I are separate, and you and I are separate, then that means that God and I are separate. And that means that everything in this universe would be separate, and it would just be so chaotic. So the illusion, the Maya of separatedness, is remedied through the practice of yoga, through the understanding that not just intellectually, but through direct revelation, direct experience of the oneness of this universe. The direct experience of the oneness. What is that? It's the joining together of the invisible and the tangible. It's actually a remembering, but on a very deep level, not just intellectually, but a full awakened awareness, like the penny actually drops. And we have had example of people like this in history, such as Jesus, Buddha, and many great teachers who've never made it into the history books, who made it their awareness through direct revelation that they finally realized the oneness of the universe. And then tried to provide a path for other people to have the same. And all of these people were great yogis. So this is what the union is. This is what the oneness is that we are looking for. And we're going to just press a little pause and have a little break in a moment. And then I recommend that you go and have a bite to eat and a stretch and a glass of water. But up until this point, if you have any questions, I want you to, before you take a little break, just write those questions down. And you can send this to me in email, or you can just put them as rhetorical questions into your diary. But I just want you to understand that Samkhya is the theory and yoga is the system that developed from there. Okay, the system of direct experience. And I'm going to share a little video for you on Samkhya philosophy, and then it explains Samkhya philosophy quite nicely, and you'll be able to get a nice idea of that. Okay, so I'll share that for you either now on this video or on the online academy for you to watch. And then later on today, we'll find out how is that revealed? How do we go about that? What do the yoga poses have to do with any of this? And because that's what a lot of people are probably thinking now. And what does this mean for us in a world 6,000 years later? What does this mean for us today? Because the more you end up studying yoga, the more you realize that it is more relevant now today than ever before. And really what the ancient rishis, the seers, who were people who had direct experience of these things, and they taught it. These people were really paving the way for us and gave us a system to follow. So it's like the person who walks the hike on the mountain the first time. Someone had to walk that path first. And then each time a person walks it, it becomes a well-known hiking trail. All right, so I want you to go and have a little break now, have some water, take a stretch, breathe some fresh air in, and then we will resume shortly. All right, hopefully you've had your little break by now, and we're going to watch the little Samkhya video together. And I'm not too sure, to be honest with you, how it's going to translate onto this recording. So I'm also going to put it on the online academy as well. All right, just to be safe. So I'm going to try my best. We're going to play it, and then I'll also put the link there for you so that you can watch it if it doesn't come onto the recording now.
Samkhya is an Indian philosophical school that is considered dualistic, positing the existence of two fundamental principles,